So UC did a big aerosol study over the summer with the head of the woodwind percussion and brass department. And they had actually faculty members go in and participate in the study in terms of playing their instruments. So they studied different instruments and how the aerosols were dispersed, and came to the conclusion that everyone should have a HEPA filter in their room and be able to teach a normal lesson. And they would use the biggest studios. But then at the end of the lesson, you have to open the windows if you can, and then leave half an hour before the next lesson can start. So this template is also being used for practice pods. So I think it's something like 5 to 8 students are in one pod, and they get to sign up for a 2-hour practice slot, and then half an hour of clearing the air, cleaning the room, and then another 2-hour slot. And if you don't want to use all your 2 hours, I think you can say, I'm only going to use 8 to 9:30, and the next person can start at 10. But the school has not mandated that we come in and teach live. It's whatever the professor is comfortable with. Because I have 2 immunocompromised members of the family, I'm going to teach remotely and allow students to come and have lessons in the backyard if they so desire. That's worked out pretty well over the summer, depending on weather and depending on the comfort level of the student. But I think I have 8 coming back. 4 are not in Cincinnati. There's 1 in China. There's 1 in New York. There's 1 in Boston. And I can't remember what the other one is, but the others are here, and they're going to try to go to school. They're going to try to play an ensemble. And everyone knows that everything can change on a dime. They're scheduled to have ensemble. It could, if somebody comes down with, if there's a positive test, then that's going to be canceled. So I think everyone knows the risks.
At the academy that I teach with Andy, when they will reopen, it will be a little bit like what Ixi explained. So we will have this big room. We don't have so many big rooms in the academy in Hong Kong, but we have now a new part, and basically it's going to be a plexiglass as a screen between the students and the teacher. Plus, it's going to be an air purifier. It's going to be all kind of sanitized, to clean every single surface, blah, blah, blah. And it's going to be every 1 hour lesson. Then the cleaner is going to come for half an hour. So you will only be able to book through like 1 hour, and then you have to wait a half an hour, and then you have to. So it's going to be a little bit like that when it will be open. If we're going to have a virus continues, then we will keep doing a lesson online.
At UAB, I'm very fortunate that we are a big hospital medical school, and so there are very, very strict protocols in place. And we're in the they're calling it high flex model. So for me, it's 1 week in person, 1 week in Zoom. And when we are in person, the students can go one way down a hallway. There are arrows on the floor. There are plenty of extra masks right as they walk in the door if they don't have them. There's a mask policy on the entire campus. Hand sanitizers everywhere. When they come into my studio, I open the door, I let them out. They're responsible for either bringing their own music stand, or we have tons of wipes that to wipe down anything that they touch, and I do that again after they leave. There are puppy pads to put underneath the instrument to protect the carpet. And I even have a plastic, kind of like a bank teller screen on my desk as I sit far across the room from them. But the band, we're also in person having to play with COVID bags and mouthpieces with drapes and slits. The whole band does this. And our bands all of our concert bands are divided in half now. So they're doing very socially distanced. Again, with every instrument's got bell covers, bags. So we're just taking tons of protocols and precautions, which has been great because we've had very, very few. I think we've had 2 students total who've come down with COVID so far. Very small numbers in the whole university, which we're grateful for.
We are just promising blended model. So some people are doing face-to-face every week, and some less. I'm doing alternating weeks, especially for at least for the first few months until like things settle a bit. So 1 week online and 1 week face-to-face. What's a little bit different to get used to is we can only be in a room playing for 45 minutes, and for the bands only 30 minutes, and there's a rotation. So there's a lot more people, like not crowded, but like in the hallways at a quarter after the hour, you know, making sure that the rooms are airing out. So you know, so that can be, when we're on Zoom, it's a little bit different. So we can stay the full hour, or, you know, depending on where the student is. But yeah, so it's a blended model. And so the ensembles, depending on the ensemble, some of them are breaking into very, very small groups, you know, like chamber wind groups or clarinet choirs, etc. They've gone with a lot of distance and and bell masks, but that's about it. And then one thing that what's been really helpful, because we do have a new building, we have a lot of space, and it's been open to us. Like if you're going to teach face-to-face, you can book a room. So they gave us priority. So I am teaching now in these massive rooms when I am there face-to-face. And that helps with accompanists and stuff like that, because our offices, even though you can get 6 feet, 6 feet with wind playing and then a third person in there gets kind of tight. So that's been really nice.
Since internet is already in our lives, we can be connected, but we are not really in touch. And how are you? And how is it going with your studies? How do you feel? If the students have a problem, because they do in these strange days, that you are there for them. So I think this is a great opportunity to become a different teacher, and for that I'm very enthusiastic. I'm a very positive person, and I'm just starting to learning how to adapt and become a better teacher for all my students.
Trying to get them on board as much as we can with the technology aspect of it, but the rest of it I think is the same things that make a successful student-teacher relationship in the real world. You know, devotion to your students, devotion to your, as a student, to your craft and to your art and to your instrument. Those things, you know, in a perfect world would stay the same. Keeping the students motivated also, or helping them feel motivated during this time, I think is really challenging, because there's so much unknown. And so I think that's like, you know, part of being a teacher. It's like there's a certain amount of you know, therapist almost, like being able to talk to my students about how they're feeling during COVID, and like checking in with them a little bit, maybe more than I normally would. Those kinds of things. The psychology of teaching are things that I've been trying to think about a little bit more.
The online wasn't new to me, but it was a struggle at first for a lot of the students to make their own schedule, especially when so many courses were asynchronous, and that was really hard. There were a lot of mental health problems that I've seen people express on the internet, and so I think that was the biggest challenge.
Finally, we slowed down and just for a moment, keep it like that. Just breathe and please think about, do you really want to do this? And actually also, if we talk about keep them motivating, for what? Because if you are not motivated, you are not good enough. If you don't play enough fast, enough good technique, are you not good enough? No, so what I think is we have to rethink this whole teaching and learning and music and stuff, because I think even if this pandemic has the terrible side, this was so necessary to stop the time a little.
In preparation for every lesson, I have them record their lesson essentially. Like if they're going to play me Brahms in the lesson, I say, you pre-record it, because maybe the Zoom is not going to be working, or the tempo speeds up and slows down and stuff. If they pre-record it, I can hear their tone and it sounds much better. And then they will, either I'll listen ahead of time or they'll play it for me in the lesson. But instead, you know, in a normal lesson, maybe they wing it for the lesson, you know, they just sort of hope that they can get away with maybe not practicing as much. But when they pre-record it, maybe it takes them 3 or 4 times to get it good enough for them to play it in the lesson. So already they're just getting better and better and better. And then that was sort of amazing. And then in the midweek section, I would do something else, say, okay, record me these orchestral excerpts and send them to me. And then we have this, I'm sure you all do as well, these sort of online management system things, but ours works really quite well, and where I could sort of listen to their video, and then I would just get out my clarinet and just do a little 5-minute feedback video and say, okay, you should do this, 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 and play my video, and then push send, and then that would go back to them. And again, it was just that connection, because I think what they're missing, like we've all said, is they're missing their ensembles, and I don't see them in the hallway. We can't talk and see how they're going. And so sort of feeling like they're not completely isolated in their bedrooms.
I find that with the Zoom format, it's actually helps for focusing even more than the private lesson situation, just having them in one space talking about things. I like to share some recordings with them. So I would have somebody pull up a recording and we talk about it. And you know, I think it's a great time for doing a lot of listening and a lot of reading also. I think reading some biographies, you know, about composers or performers, you know, because when else are we going to have the time, really, to really kind of be immersed in be able to have the time to just, you know, spend a couple hours reading something.
I've actually come to realize that it's helping my students come up with how they need to sound on their own. And so I'm having to ask them, like, who are you listening to this week? What are you listening to this week? How do you want this thing to sound? Like larger concept ideas about, like, this isn't working, this phrase or this technical passage. Like, how are you going to fix it without me just immediately, without even thinking, just being like, okay, do this, play it like this, listen to me, play with me, let's fix it. And I didn't even think about the fact that I might have been withholding them from a little bit of their learning by that was always my reaction, was to jump in and just fix it. Just play with me, let's fix it. But I don't even know if it was as successful as I imagined it was in the past, because I had to continuously do that. So that's one of the things, is trying to get them to really come up with some of those solutions on their own with questions prompted by me.
We had to find a way to communicate, to speak about the music. They had to develop a vocabulary, also how they express themselves, how they speak about music. There's also the more like technical part, like to find the right spots in the score, or to take notes, or to write something in the score, which sometimes as a teacher I would just write it in the score for the student to save some time or something. So they kind of had to emancipate themselves, and I thought this was a really positive effect for me. Also that I could not interrupt them that easily. When they were playing, they just played, and which I thought was really nice. So you can really see the state where they are, and they play without excuses and interrupting. So, and then you discuss. So it was more of like the separation of playing and discussing was at the beginning for me a little bit difficult, but as soon as I arranged myself with the situation, I thought there were also a lot of benefits.
For me, and maybe it's just pertinent to my life, but I've found that this has forced me to look at things in a different way, look at the way that I teach in a different way, and maybe use multimedia in a more visceral way, so that the students can appreciate it more. And I actually think that my teaching and what's going on in our studio at the University of Michigan and at Case Western is superior to what was going on before the whole thing started, because of being able to take advantage of some of the things that I really hadn't thought of, because traditionally, you have your private hour with your teacher and you sit down and you go through your stuff and you play and they play and you talk and they talk, and then that hour ends. And if you're lucky, you might meet them a second time if you have extra time during the week. That's the way that I run my studio. But now I feel like I have this like ongoing engagement with my students, because I've encouraged them to video me during the week. And so, they'll say, hey, I've been working on this articulation. What do you think? Is it getting better? And then I can write back and I can say, nope, or yeah, whatever. And then maybe play for them a little. And so that we have this ongoing dialogue. And yeah, it's a lot more involved for me, but actually it's very stimulating. And I feel like the product has grown faster than in previous years.
And it's a little finicky. You have to start it up in the right order. The phone first, and then the main app. Okay, and so I don't know. Can you guys see this now?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and so there it is. So there's a second area, because I have a big table. I'm using my dining room table when I'm teaching, and you go to demonstrate to show a fingering, and bang, you bang your bell on the table like no thanks. So here it is. So can you guys all see both windows? Dan, can you see both windows? Yeah, okay, great. And so, you can show them, no, this key here, or whatever. And, depending on the angle you want to use with the thing, you can set it up any way, which way you want. And what's nice is it's a free thing. And there are paid levels where you can have more windows and you have more control over where it goes, but really this is enough. I just sort of found that, in terms of the ease of setting it up, this was enough, and for what I needed it to do, this is enough. So it's called ManyCam, and there's a free option with it. So yeah, I've found it really helpful.
It's, in a way, it really has forced the students to be more autonomous and to be more start earlier in the career thinking about being their own best teacher, right? That we're by the force of circumstances and necessity is the mother of invention, right? So they've had to be more independent, more self-critical, and more autonomous, and that's a very hard thing for some people. But again, I think a lot of people have realized that everyone is in the same place and in it together in a way that you can take your boots by the bootstraps and get there. So yes, talk about what they're doing in their lessons, what they're doing in their practice time. I love that they can kind of talk about it and then walk the walk and talk the talk, right? Show you how they are tackling a difficult passage. And for a lot of students, I know that will help them in their career in so many ways down the road.
I'm going to really try and give them a really good overview of a lot of things that maybe I have let go in the past. I absolutely think it's made me a better teacher already, just by thinking about it.
We just had our faculty potpourri recital that we do early in the semester, and we all recorded separately and submitted videos, so it was over Zoom. Student recital was over Zoom, with the exception of the pianist who goes into the hall and plays, with no one else there except the person recording and her teacher. So we're trying to get to the place where we have a mixture of people performing with a very limited audience, very socially distanced, and then also live streaming so that it can be shared that way. And there's just such a different energy. I very much miss performing. I miss being in front of an audience. I miss touring and chamber music and playing with the orchestra. But right now it's just it's trying to walk that line of keeping us safe but trying to get it back. And I very much agree with both of you that we've got to start trying to find ways to expand it, because I do think this is our reality for the next while. And instead of just giving up on it, we're going to have to, I think the audiences are hungry for it. I think it would uplift our spirits. It would make life seem more normal. It would give work back to people who are needing to work. And I think we're just going to have to continue to be creative in how we find ways to safely gather And I too get frustrated with the restaurant thing when I see people doing that, but then we're not able to, have an ensemble together when we're trying to all be so carefully with safety protocols. So, for us right now, it's just a mix. We are doing some outdoor performances. Our university very kindly gave us a couple of very large tents and so as the weather is good, like our jazz ensembles are rehearsing out there, and they've given us a special place to store keyboards and things like that so that we can easily get out to do that. But it's going a lot more slowly than I hoped it would. I was supposed to have a faculty recital this semester, and my colleagues and I decided let's wait till the spring and see if it's any better, because there's just nothing like playing for that live audience. And it's going to be a different feeling doing it for maybe 10 people or 30 people, however many we could fit into whichever hall we're in, compared to trying to just go to a computer screen. It's just, or to a camera. It's just not the same feeling, both for us as performers, and I think for also maybe the frustration of giving our students that experience of them being able to have a live performance is so different. As we all know, compared to playing something and preparing a video to give to a student recital or something, it's just not the same. And they know it. They're being good-natured about it right now, but I think we have to continue to have that dialogue, both with musicians but also with our government officials, and making them realize that we can do this safely if you'll just let us, just give us the chance to do it. But starting small with chamber groups, I think, is the way we're trying to do that.
And my idea was like, well, what if we did like half and half? So we would get some musicians who are nationally recognized or very well known, and then have them collaborate with some of our local people who are also like really starved for chamber music, and we'll have that going during the regular season. So not just in the summer, but from September to May, and we would just have a couple of concerts like that. And that was the original idea, and then we'll also make it really interesting and really relevant and progressive, and not just another one of those, like, so I get the motto we came up with is it's not going to be another stuffy classical music series. So that was the original idea, and we went with that idea, applied for this competitive grant, and we got the grant, and I think it was like March 12th when we got the grant, and I think March 13th is when like the national shutdown happened. So it was like the day before this thing. So we were like, okay, what do we do now? Like our original model is kind of out of the window. That's out of the question. And for a couple of months, I think I went into like a deep depression, and I think a lot of people did, like just kind of sing it around, and what's next? Like, what are we gonna do? Like a shock, And then when I started coming to it, I said, okay, well, we need to adopt or adapt this. We need to change it up and we have to do something. We have to be of service to the community in some way. So we came up with this idea of epic community concerts. And it's basically chamber music concerts with local musicians, the ones that are here, we said, okay, we're going to do this live. Somehow we're going to figure out how to do this live. Luckily, in Colorado, in our area of Colorado, the COVID was not as horrible as in a lot of other areas of the country. It's still pretty moderate here in Colorado Springs. And in July, we also, me and my colleague came up with this idea of we want to start doing live chamber music, small coachings for people who are used to playing in ensembles like youth symphonies, and we have a New Horizons band for adults here. And these people are really missing concerts. We all kind of felt that, if you remember, like in the summer, how I think times are a little bit different now, but it was like a very hard time. So it was a total experiment where we said, okay, we're going to go overboard on safety, like crazy distancing, huge spaces, as much outdoor as possible. masks, temperature checks, air, air circulation, all these things, wiping down, after every coaching. And we started really small like that, and it progressed, and we started getting more comfortable with this, and we're like, okay, this is fine, this is working. Everybody's actually, some of the concerns were, would people go for this? Would they want to do this? Yes, 40 people did it. Now it's like up to 60. And so that's when I was like, okay, maybe epic community concerts will also work if we apply the same safety. If we have a venue that is semi-outdoor, a cool place that people would want to come hang out, lots of air circulation, distancing, masks required for the audience and for the chamber music participants who are not winds, so the winds would kind of distance ourselves. And like James said, maybe we're not super, but with each other, we're kind of on the honor system, I guess. We all trust that we're careful and things like that. And the first concert was hugely successful, and it just felt great because people came up to us, and were saying like, thank you so much for this. Like, some of them haven't been out of the house in 2 months, and they got to dress up and they got to go to this thing, and they just felt fantastic. It's something that we need. It's like, for humans, being in these situations, it's like, it's the worst thing, so we were so happy that we were able to help in that way. And we're scheduling, we have a second concert coming up in about a week and a half, and a lot of planning goes into this. We have student volunteers, and I think that's good for them too, is to see that you can create your own things from scratch. And if you're a little bit creative and you work really hard, it's a lot of work. It's like there are 3 people working on this, and we all have to do like 12 jobs each, and so it's hard, but it's extremely rewarding, and it's been working so far. So
I don't know, I'm curious what y'all think about using a cappella as a tool. I found that, especially if I don't allow myself to use it has a metronome built into it, and like most of these videos I make, I just use the metronome because it makes it way easier. But weirdly, I feel like there's an opportunity to practice chamber music skills by recording a cappella videos with yourself, because when you can't blame other people for things, like when you're playing all the parts and you lay down the second part and you're like, man, that tie that I came off was like not even close to like being in time. I feel like it's really revealing. And as a player, I feel like I've also done some online stuff where we're like streaming together multiple places, and we rely on a click track for that. And being forced to just like play a bunch with a click track and like hear back how I sound afterward, I think like has really like helped me address some problems that I historically have had with just being like a typical professional musician, like on the backside of the beat a lot of the time. And I think it's good. There's, again, the silver linings is such a small random thing, but there are definitely habits that I've had to come face to face with in my own playing as a result of just like what tools are available and like the idiosyncrasies of those tools that make me think about things like pedagogical things. And I just wonder, have you all thought about that at all in terms of projects using that kind of thing?
Yeah, I couldn't believe how difficult it was to play with a cappella. I was just like, oh my gosh. So all your Bach projects, James, have been with a cappella?
Yeah, and most of them are with the metronome. And I just want to be clear. Obviously, listening and responding is and being flexible, is the name of the game, of course, obviously. But I think recording things with yourself, you notice what things set you up well and what things are going to set you up poorly. And I think just like, I don't know if y'all have had this experience just with if you're erring on the side of being slightly early on things, sometimes it's easier to recover in a way that's musical. Like if you happen to push it too far and you like do a little thing, like you can get out of it more easily than if you're like behind the beat and you have to go like da, 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 da. It's like, it's hard to make that sound musical. And it's like, there's little things like that that are just about like, you know, like which way to err in terms of time that I feel like have been really hammered home by just doing things with myself. So yeah, normally if I do something in a cappella, I almost always start with a bass line. And then I'm frequently using a metronome just because like I'm trying to get these things done in like an hour and like, you know, and I don't want to mess with it. But early on, it was hilarious. Like I couldn't believe like how bad I was at counting certain things. And like I said, you can't blame it. It's just like normal human psychology. Like if we can blame somebody else, it's really easy for the brain to just go there, you know? I mean, even if we're like all nice, friendly people, it's just like a natural instinct. But when you know, in these kind of tools, there's no hiding from it. Like it's literally you 5 seconds ago, like, you know. But yeah, it's been fun working with that. And, you know, it's just, you know, it's just something I do for myself. I've always loved playing through Bach, like the solo stuff. I feel like it's like the greatest etudes that exist in a certain way, you know, because it like has technical challenges, goes through all the registers, but it's also musical with like a lot of depth to it. But going through all these cantatas that I didn't know well before, like when else is a clarinet player gonna, you know, dive into these cantatas other than a global pandemic? So that's been fun, and a cappella has been a really useful, you know, it's so ubiquitous and lame, but like it works well for what it is. And you know, I guess there's a free version too, so that it can be useful for students and people who are on a budget.
That's amazing. Have you ever experimented with like Jam Kazam, or I mean, there's some really higher end, supposedly real, you know, real time.
I haven't, but there is an organization called 45th Parallel in Portland that I'm part of. That's another kind of chamber music organization. It's about 10 years old, and we have a board member who's a coder, and he built a platform for us. At some point, I think it'll have a name, and it might be like more publicly available. But it has a bunch of shortcomings to it for sure. But the way it works is that it's a sequential system. So you know, major downside is person in position 1 can't hear anyone except themselves, and person in position 2 hears themselves in position 1, so on and so forth. And so there is repertoire that you can do without a click track. My wife is a violinist, and we've done some shows, some clarinet quartet, clarinet and string trio music where, you know, these, I don't know if y'all know the Crucell pieces, but you'll have these kind of things where like the violin or the clarinet will start virtually everything, and you can kind of drive the bus, with the exception of like a couple of places where like it's hilarious and you have to like kind of conduct the people that you can't hear through something. But we've been successful with that. If you were to do something, you know, and I wonder if it's ever more widely available. A situation where it could be useful is there's certain repertoire for, it would be weird for the accompanist, but there's certain repertoire for piano and clarinet or other instruments where the, you know, romantic era stuff, classical era stuff, where the piano has almost all of the small subdivisions throughout. Like for instance, I did Schumann fantasy pieces, where the pianist couldn't hear me at all, but she just did all the normal rubato that she's used to doing, and I could see her hands. I watched her hands, and it was great. It felt fine. And you know, the guy mixes it and puts reverb on it and sends it out. So every Friday night we've been doing a show like that, and the plan for the organization is to just do it like that indefinitely. And again, many shortcomings, but you know, again, the silver linings thing, you learn things that you would never learn before. You know, like I said, it's really hammered home certain things for me that I think, you know, I'm like 14 years into a professional career here that I have been aware of for a while, but like have suddenly fixed just because it was laid bare in a way that was more obvious, painfully obvious, you know, through some of the technology, you know, how the technology reveals certain things.
It's awesome. Jenna, did you want to add anything?
I was going to say about the acapella. I like acapella quite a bit, especially because we were exploring a lot of software programs and stuff, and just apps and DAWs over the summer as a whole faculty, as I'm sure many of you have been. And I mean, of course, the problem does become equality. And so, as much as we have our own, like all this equipment, it's like we just can't possibly require it in a syllabus, you know. And so acapella is like, it's paid. I mean, maybe there's a free version now, but it's also only Apple products and devices, and we're just getting into this, you know. So we also, interestingly enough, kind of like, okay, well, what's the worst case scenario? Let's try it that way, you know. Like, let's try a voice memo, let's try a video on your phone, like anything. And you know, we still got something out of it. I still get more out of the visual, especially for certain pieces, being able to see and hear how someone, especially, you know, something that's so physical like string player, how they play it, you know. And so I guess I was just going to go back just with the equality of everything, and all of these programs like Jamulus and Clean Feed and everything, and all the hookup, and we've had to be very, very, very considerate of of students, because of course some universities, you know, requiring microphones and require like specific things. We have not done that. We of course encourage it, but again, then you can get onto a whole bunch of programs and subscriptions, and you know, and that's tough, I think. So we as faculty, we've made a conscious effort of tried to, okay, best case scenario, if everyone has a cappella in a quartet, you know, great. But you know, what's the other worst case scenario? Because of course you're dealing with Wi-Fi and upload and download speeds and things like that. So you know, if I feel good about it, I feel like we're being flexible, and we can tackle anything we might encounter.
During the summer, we didn't meet at all, and that was really rough, because you know, we have our clarinet section is very large, and not being able to play together was really kind of tragic for us. And so when we started recording last week and the week before, and we've taken the band and we've broken it down into 3 bubble bands. And so what that does is it protects the medical integrity of each little bubble band. So if someone starts exhibiting symptoms or their family member is sick, then we can leave that band alone, and we have 2 others. So we've got like 3 chamber bands right now, and we have our Navy birthday concert coming up and our holiday concerts coming up, and of course they're canceled to a live audience. But our public affairs and our productions team has become very innovative in figuring out ways to, we're going to be having watch parties, we're going to be releasing this audio visual information onto our social media platforms, onto the Navy's social media platforms. And so right now we are recording content for our Navy birthday concert, which really consists of patriotic music, or it might have a theme of World War II or the Korean War. And so we are recording, and the most interesting thing is, since the band has been scaled down, your part is far more critical. So it's really like playing in a one on a part, clarinet 1, clarinet 2, clarinet 3, that's it. And so then your part becomes really like you're sitting in a small chamber orchestra, chamber wind ensemble. And then all of a sudden you really have to be focused in. You can't rely on your stand partner to stagger breathing. And we had that experience last week where we were just holding these altissimo, you know, high C's for 10 bars. Well, I was holding a high C for 10 bars, and my clarinet 2, she was holding the octave below me at pianissimo. And we're like sitting there trying to, you know, okay, where are we going to breathe? There's no place to breathe. So it's presenting a different set of challenges, but we are performing and we are recording.
I've noticed that with my students already, you know, like just listening to them play on Zoom. Zoom is friendly to some sorts of sounds and some sorts of concepts, and very unfriendly to other things. Like one of the things I noticed is in the articulation, if you articulate in a very heavy kind of driven way, it's just very like almost crispy, crunchy sounding. And I wonder, I've been hearing them play and I say, well, it sounds great to me. And I wonder what it will sound like when I'm sitting next to them again. And I kind of wonder if it'll be like early jazz, where the players adapted to fit recording technology, to play in a lighter way so that the record needle doesn't skip and that sort of thing.
I don't think that many people will become, no offense to anyone, but no one will become inspired by their teacher's tone over Zoom because the sound quality just isn't that good. But maybe if they send them a recording to hear and they can study from that, I think they're going to still find it to be valuable. But where I think this might be interesting, again, I'm thinking more of the long-term like performance consequences is I was just talking with someone on one of the forums online about like the concept of like difference of covered tone versus spread out tone versus warm versus bright and all these things. I think that one of the hardest parts about playing in an orchestra, for example, is developing that projection that allows you to do that without breaking up the sound, and I think that a lot of these people who are studying online for maybe the next couple of years, when they do get back into a concert hall or a venue that's going to require them to fill the room, we're going to really kind of hear if their tone has developed kind of how it normally would, if that makes any sense. I don't know if anyone else has something to comment on that, but a lot of playing for me when I was in university was like learning the room. How do you sound in this space? Is it dry? Is it, what is it like,
Sean, I think you make a really good point about that, because I feel that you as you play in a larger space, and I feel especially as a student, as you play in a larger space, you get more and more comfortable with filling the hall, filling the sound, using the hall as your instrument. I feel that and I notice this with many students when they play in the same space week after week after week, whether it be their living room or their basement or their bedroom, what have you, you're playing in by a 10 by 10 room, that your sound, you're trying to be a good musician and make that sound work in that small space. But I think that people are going to be in for an awakening when they have to start filling the hall again, whether it be technical elements like a setup, a reed sort of thing, or an air sort of thing. I think it also applies to people to playing outside. I think that you play outside and some of the nuances, or I guess even a lot of the nuances are gone. So I feel that that's going to be a difference maker too, of playing in a large hall as opposed to playing outside. I feel fortunate in Cleveland to play in the same hall and rehearse in the same hall every week. The pandemic. So I feel that you can start really tailoring your setup to the hall or to your role in the orchestra. I think that it'll take probably a little bit of time to really get back into that, to really kind of lock back into that. It'll take some time to remember, oh yeah, this is how it goes. That's just the effect of the pandemic, I think. But I think that's a really good point.
Yeah, and can I just add on to that? I've noticed over the summer when the students were at home, a lot of them didn't have the practice space they normally did, and were practicing in apartments where they had to play really quietly. One student even was very creative and was practicing in her car because she wasn't allowed to practice in her apartment. But I noticed that right away when they came back in the fall. The ones who are able to come for live lessons is working on projection and just filling the room using air, playing with a big sound. That was something they had to readjust to because of their practice situation.
That's been a huge issue for me. Especially now that BU is going on and the sessions, and I'll end the day and just my eyes will actually hurt. And a couple things that I've found to do is I turn on night mode on my computers, so it cuts down on the blue light. There's actually no official studies that say that does anything, but it seems to help me. Some people use the computer glasses. I haven't tried those yet. Yes. And then I just find an interesting byproduct is I actually find that I can't use my phone as much. I'm so used to going through my life and, oh, New York Times just popped up. I mean, especially these days. And, oh, I want to check Facebook really quickly. And I have to cut that screen time way down. And, I need to watch less TV. And so I find myself going on more hikes, actually, and more, just being outside and really trying to be more active about getting myself up, moving around, and anything that doesn't involve a screen. Because if I don't do that, it actually really physically hurts my eyes.
I was going to piggyback on what Rob said about making sure you take time for yourself to get away from the screen. In addition to our performing status, our whole organization is run by the musicians. And so I'm on our IT team. So I might have an IT meeting in addition to coming in to play. And sometimes Friday, I had 3 Zoom meetings that basically lasted 5 hours. And when it was over, I had to get out of the house. I went on a run. And then I didn't look at the screen the rest of the day because my eyes were tired. And so, we have a lot of planning meetings we use Microsoft Teams. And so, if I'm not mentoring a student, I am in some kind of planning meeting, or right now I'm writing editing performance reviews for some of the people that I work with. And that's a lot of screen time. So I have 25 of those to do in the next week, in addition to listening to all the clarinet excerpts. And so I'm trying to strategize how to accomplish all of that and still make sure I get outside and take some time for myself. And one other thing is our clarinet section has what we call a Zoom hang once a week. And it's not mandatory. It's just for people to drop in and say hi. It's a forum where people can say, hey, I'm feeling good about this, or I'm not feeling good. It's a safe zone. And so it's not affiliated with work. We just meet and we might talk about what we're working on in our practice, or we might talk about, what kind of recipes we're making for our families. But it's a safe zone for people to just emotionally check in. And we've been doing that since the summer. And I think, the same people always show up. We have some people that don't show up at all, and that's fine. It's just, that's why it's there. I always say, here it is. If you want to drop in and say hi, we are here. If you have an issue, you want to talk about something, we are here. So we're just doing kind of that emotional check-in because people miss each other. They miss playing with each other. So I think that's been a good thing for us, for our section.
In spite of all of the difficulties with the technology and trying to get this idea and that idea for this and that and the other thing, I know I have to think that this is going to translate into a better time for us. Maybe it's, as you said before, Pollyannish, but I'm sort of at the end of my career, and this is what's keeping me going, that I love to hear these kids play. I love to teach them. I love to hear what everybody says about everything. And even without changing a lot of things technologically, music is still wonderful, that's why we do this. And, maybe we're crazy, but so be it. And so I think that I have to be optimistic, and otherwise I couldn't do it.
That's beautiful, Steve. That's really motivating. I really feel like classical music is going to be fine. I mean, we've been through the flu of 1918 and World War I and World War II, and didn't we have some of our greatest works come out of Europe and between the wars, and the worst times in human history that's brought out sort of the best time in the arts. So, you know, I know we've done this for 5 months and we might need to do this longer. And the thing is, and I am really lucky that I'm employed as a university professor. I have a lot of full-time performing friends that are really, really having a hard time right now. So this is very easy for me to say, because a lot of people are really, really struggling. But you know, I just think in general, the clarinet and the arts, you know, we're going to be fine. We were, you know, we survived, what, 7 years of World War II with horrific upheaval. I mean, terrible. There's always been terrible stuff. Or think about all the great pieces that came out of, you know, Soviet Russia and all these, you know, time periods. This is sort of what the arts are for, you know, is to really bring us through this. So I try to remind my students of that, you know, this is when we actually really excel and we need to kind of, you know, buckle down and do what we do as artists. So it's going to be, I feel like we're really going to be fine because we've always been fine in the past. Musicians were always on the Titanic when it was going down, right? So this is like, we're just going to play on and, you know, people will always realize what we do if we need to remind, you know, sponsors of that, which we probably do. You know, we need to keep this on the front burner of our governments and sponsors and all of that. But I think we're gonna come through this probably stronger than ever.
Music is spirit, and in this particular unique moment, I think we must think about this. Quality we have to be musician, to think about spirit music. And this is a big help to overpass the pandemic and overpass all the problems. I mean, we have to think about how to solve the problems, but we have still music which is so helpful and so important for us.
I believe that there's no stopping the aspiration of those that produce music from the soul. So I think we have to be optimistic. If we love it, we're going to continue. To love music doesn't mean only to perform. And this is, I think, the most important thing to tell the student to get through this period is that if you love it, you'll continue. And you don't have to be a performer and you don't have to be a music major to continue to love it. And I think that's the most important silver lining that we have.
This is a time to really reflect in the big picture, especially if you're looking, we're talking about inspiration on this. I would just ask myself, first of all, what do you think the role of a musician is in the world, in society, and whatever, in your town, and why do you want to be a musician? And I think let's just start with that. I wonder how many people have actually sat down and thought about that. And then I think all the other stuff will fall into place.
May I tell it's very interesting example. So Johnny and I taught very talented students years and years ago, and just, you know, they could get the orchestra job, or they're gonna really excellent, you know, decide of soloist or something like that. But interesting thing is, like Michael Lowenstein is a great bass clarinet player, but he is representative of the Amazon sound section. Now, the creator of the Play with the Pro was Grady and Juilliard. And then now the Deutsche Grammophon, the director is the Clement, also clarinet student in Juilliard, studied with us. So now I totally agree with Lorenzo, but it's people, I always think as I'm teaching the clarinet, it's not only the instrument, but it's, you know, creativity or the life, or, you know, I sharing my idea or something like that. And then finally, all those people finds the way what they live, you know, that's my feeling. So this is unbelievably interesting. All my students is so talented, but going to the all different, you know, things, and they're doing, find them in themselves there, then they're doing great. So
I'm kind of writing down a lot of the words that we are using and adapt.
it's probably the winner. So I think I would say we, as teachers, we need to encourage our students and motivate them to adapt the times that we are at, and that could be a key. It is without being angry or fear of that new time. Have fear to that new time. Embrace that the best way we can, in the most positive way.